Hi there. Most of you know me. I'm Emily Rogers, and I'm the director here. And I am so pleased and happy to have Weldon doing our first Sunday with the Artist in the new year. The Sunday with the Artist program is basically funded through Volusia County and through their mini grant program. And it's now being even funded for more than just Weldon's. But we're really pleased to have him. He's an award-winning painter, and I'm sure if you have been to many of our openings or come to the gallery here, you've seen his work, which is amazing. And I'm going to turn it over to him and let him tell you something about himself.
My name's Weldon Ryan. I'm an artist. I'm the Carnival painter, as most people know me. I paint my subject matter, Carnival, my culture, which is I'm from Trinidad, so Trinidad and Tobago. So the whole West Indian culture is what I'm trying to put forth, so that everyone know who I am and what I do and about the culture. My beautiful wife, Richland, she pushes me and she tells me how to get things rolling, and she does a whole lot of intricate things for me. So I thank her. What I paint realistically, as most of you know. At least I try to. That's the genre that I choose. Now, of course, there's different facets of realism, but I like to think that if you paint figuratively, um, you are a realist painter. And the whole thing is what scale. I tend to go for a more larger scale of realism than just a lighter version. So that's what I do, and basically my technique has been learned over the course of time. I use the Frank Riley method mixed with a Max Ginsberg method, which is more alla prima, basically dabbing colors to make things happen, to cool your colors to change your values and so forth. So that's basically how I approach things. Now, I painted stages. The first stage is the drawing stage. Generally, what I do is I do the opaque projection, because if I was to draw intricately the way that I want to, I'll be there for weeks, and it'll keep me away from what I want to do. I want to lay down the colors. So here's a couple of samples of how my tracings come to. All right, and we say tracing. It's actually a little bit more intricate than that, because I put a lot of detail in the drawings that I do off of the opaque projector. There's certain intricate areas, curves, and transitions that I put into my tracings to make me understand as I paint. If in case I don't remember the information that I saw, it helps me to retrieve it. It's another piece that I'm working on, and it's, of course, it's very preliminary, but it's very detailed the way that I have it traced out. The funny thing is, it's detailed for me, but as I start to paint, I'm going to start losing some of these details. So I have to rely on my ability to paint. Now, before the opaque, well, I use this setup to help me paint, because with this setup, with my laptop and this situation, Photoshop, I can move things around. I can enlarge items, areas I want to paint, which makes it very easy. If you see, it makes it very easy for me to start manipulating. The only trick is with this, the colors, being that it's from a RGB color scheme. The monitor, computer colors. It fluctuates, and that's always a problem. So it does trick your eye. So I got to be careful with that. Generally, what I used to do was I used to paint from prints, and all of the colors are there, but for some reason the depth of the image was not there. So you take a look at these items that I have. Oh, come on. It's Carnival, man. It's Carnival. Like, no. Yeah, So these are images. This one, actually, I cut it in half and I flipped the image, so it made one. But I have yet to get to these. I'm probably not going to get to them, because as things go on, images come through, and we go to all these carnivals we go to. Images like replaces other images, so I scrap this and move on to something else. um, all right. Using the Munsell color theory, it's about value, learn the value scale, and all of the colors as you go along has a value to them. Say, for instance, well, basically the lightest light and the darkest dark. So that's the whole value thing. Generally, I uh, I skip a whole lot of that, because I went to the Art Students League and in New York, and I did all the studies, and I read books and did all the research, and I found that dang, it's too much information to try to do. So to simplify life, I just decided, the way I do my color pencils. Incidentally, I was a forensic artist for the NYPD, and basically, all I did was draw with pencils, grayscale. So I just said simply, let me just work on 5 values: the middle tone, a dark, and a light. Everything else as you paint will mesh into itself as you blend. All right, and of course the darkest darks and the lightest lights, and of course the highlights. So that's how I approach what I do. Um, the structure in which I paint, like I said, I paint in stages. The first stage is very rough, and I'm all over the place. Especially being that I work large, I try to relate all of the parts together. But sometimes I might be on something, and something comes to my mind. I guess the ADHD situation, and I jump to something other than what I was working on. I'll get back to it, but bottom line, the first stage though, I work on the whole object and try to bring it to one understanding for me. Then the second stage, I get into finer details, trying to get the parts correct. All right, and it's funny. That's how I work with the forensic art as well. And then the third stage is the finer stage, and I work on getting all the fine details going. And of course, the fourth stage, if I ever get to it, if I ever get to it, um, is like really getting the finish. Now that's ultra realism, and I seem to never really get there because there's always shows that I want to try to get into, galleries I want to submit to. So I have to tailor what I do because bottom line is, um, I want to make money at this, like all of us. we want some success. So the best way to do that is to get your samples out to the galleries and see. It's like fishing. You throw that line out, see what catch. So it's been good for us lately. So it's been pretty good. All right, I'm gonna kind of get to what I'm doing. I played around with some things last night, trying to simplify what I do so you can see in a visual. Um, this is an example of something that this is like the first stage. And they say paint in blocks and shapes. I sometimes never get to that because I sometimes go away from that. I get into certain areas and I get into a little detail. Now this, I just wanted to show generally the eyes and some other blocking in of colors that I did here. All right, so that's just to get an understanding of where I am with that. Now, yes. What's that? Yeah, and that happens all the time. See, that's why people say it's cheating, but it's not paint by numbers. I've got to understand certain areas, certain uh, anatomical things to it. So with say for instance a portrait, you have to understand or have a good sense of anatomy. So when I do that, I do lose some information, but I continue on because I understand what I'm doing. All right. So um, now my medium, I use Gamsol, a paint thinner. What I do, I expedite my drying time because though I talk alla prima and paint wet on wet, I sometimes like to have my paints dry faster so that I can continue working rather than waiting days or weeks. I mean, there's other things that you can use. There's all kinds of products to accelerate your drying time and not mess yourself up. But I put a few drops of cobalt dryer in this, and that expedites the drying time. Um, okay, and I do premix, and I use tubes, and I fill them in here. Say for instance, there are certain transitional colors, certain greens, or even grays, like the 3 value grays that generally I make my grays. It's usually a number 3 gray according to this, number 5 gray, and number 7. I try not to get past 7 because then it's too dark. Okay. Oh, and one other thing, everyone loves Bob Ross, and he's always doing stuff with this. All right. In my experimentation, this is a liquid first coat. It's a clear coat, and you can't put it on too thick, but you thin it out enough, and it kind of helps you really gloss over things. Say, for instance, if you have something painted, you can put this liquid clear on it. You can use linseed oil too, but for some reason I love using this, and sometimes so I mix this into my medium, and it actually helps with the smooth layering of colors, and the drying time. My boss has said it's time to get down to business. Um, the funny thing is, everyone talks about flesh tones. How do you mix flesh tones? Well, quite honestly, I mix flesh tones with the yellow and red and little burnt umber or anything like that. But quite honestly, when it comes down to it, I simplify life and I buy the flesh tones. I buy flesh color. It's the same thing. I've done it over and over for years. I've been mixing flesh, and I found that it's just so much bunk. The cadmium red light, and the bottom line is, this simplifies my life. So I do that. Now I do say I pre-mix my colors, and of course I look at the object and the light's so bad. Sometimes, I have a set lighting in my studio space, and I pretty much bought everything out here except for my lights. So my colors are so certainly off. But I premix judging from what I have. Like I said, I take the middle value of things, and I'm trying to see this. And what I do is, I lessen, I tint it down, or I should say, one of the important things about painting, and most of you know that, is the value, hue, and chroma. Those are the three things that are very important in painting. All right. This I'm trying to mix the middle tone. All right, and that's going to be where I branch off from. So from the middle tone, I work on like I said, a dark and a lighter one, and then I can start working from that. So I'm just going to start going here because my boss says, "Hey, let's stop the talking and get to working." All right. Now the problem is that it's very bright. The chroma, the strength of the color, is very strong in this. So what I do, I tone it down, and so I take a little. I can use the burnt umber. All right, and I can put it into the mix and take it down a notch. I can also use ultramarine blue to kill the color a little bit as well. There's ultramarine, you have a cerulean blue. I mean, so many other ways that to take down the color. Basically, that's one of the formulas anyway when you mix flesh. But from the tube, it's not as strong as I wanted. So I'm trying to match the colors, and wow, from here it's because of the lighting and everything else, it's very blue. I don't want to do that, so I'm gonna have to do a little guesswork and stay away from making it very blue. All right, so I mix enough portion of it so that I can now do a little darker. Oh, incidentally, sometimes cheap colors really help. Right here, this is from Hobby Lobby. This color here is brown gray. All right, this brown gray saves me a lot of time. What I generally like to do, and you can make this color, by the way, with the flesh tones from the tube and adding a little bit ivy black in it, and you can get this. But so that it saves time. So with that, it also helps reduce the chroma of what I'm trying to do. All right, so like I said, I'm gonna try to mix some darker values on this. So and it takes a little work to get it going. Sometimes as you make it darker, you kind of kill the strength of the color, but you want the value low. So I just dab from somewhere else. All right. I like to use Venetian red or I forgot the earth red or something of the sort, but I use a Venetian red. It's another brand name. It's chromium oxide red, I believe, and it helps get back the chroma. So sometimes when you reduce when you mix the value, you sometimes lose a little bit of the chroma. So I do that, and where's my rag? And then I want to get lighter, so naturally it's adding white as a tint to get it lighter. white sometimes it just dulls it as well. So that's where Naples yellow comes into play. Very important. So I put that in there to help it out a little bit. All right. So what I decided to do, I had these samples here, but I wanted to basically show you how I work with the drawing. But I'm going to work on just certain parts of this, and I'm going to jump around because right now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to wrap my head around the piece. It takes a while to get into your piece sometimes, so you have to play around with it. So actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working with the eyes. Although I mixed these values, I'm going to start working with the eyes, and um, I jump around. I don't know if any of you have a major way of working constantly the same, especially at the very beginning of anything. Hey, Marilyn. So I'm gonna take, and I didn't talk about my palette, but that's irrelevant right now. I'm gonna move on to Van Dyke Brown. All right, and I'm gonna start with this side of this eye first. All right, and usually I like to work from this way to that way, but in this instance, I'm gonna work on this one. So I'm gonna try to render the eyes a little bit so that at least you can get an idea of what it takes me. Now with the cobalt dryer that I use, it really helps and expedite. It accelerates the drying time to such a degree that once I get back to this, say if I move elsewhere, I get back to this, um, it's pretty much dry already, and I can work on top of it. It's a fantastic situation for me. All right. Now, as far as the eyes, of course, they're lids. So they close, they open and close. So I have to keep that in mind. So what I'm doing is I'm just working about the brush. I'm gonna try to get that whole thing going. So of course, working from dark to light as in oil, that's basically part of the Bible. Painting with oil, working from dark to lights. There are instances where you don't have to, but that's supposed to be how you're supposed to handle it. Now the eyelids, they're flaps for the most part. They open and close, and of course they're three-dimensional, so um, they have a certain way of looking. All right, so I'm trying to do that now. Usually the red and the lid at the bottom is usually the lightest. So I'm just basically indicating stuff right now so that when I get back to it, it's an easy flow. So, and sometimes you got to paint what you know and not what you see sometimes. And as you go on, comes together. I mix my my um, Clara, the whites of the eyes. I used ultramarine blue, white, a little bit of the flesh tones to give it some sort of life. And I'm looking at these eyes; they're very blue. Of course, this is a doctored photo a little bit. So when you work from doctored photos, you have to be understanding that there's some things that you might have to augment. Um, move on to a smaller brush. It's funny when I work, I work like this. I've got a whole bunch of brushes in my hand to the size that I generally need, and so I switch around. So once I get tired of one brush, I move on to the next. So that's good. Okay. No, I primarily work with flats, with brights. I don't like flats because for some reason there's less control for me. So I like using The brights. I use brights. I very seldom use filberts because I don't like the control I have with it. Everyone has a special thing that they like doing. I'm trying to work so that everyone could see. um, a little bit of the iris. I'm seeing her eyes kind of very brown. Um, in my haste, I forgot to put my sienna brown in there. My burnt sienna. Forgot to put that in. It's all right. Now, people stylize the eyes. I kind of try to paint what I see with when it comes to that. So, the three-dimensional aspect, what I like to do, and I'm just indicating the highlighted area. All right. So I'll do that with a lighter blue because it all depends on the light that's shining, actually. But I tend to believe that when you look at the blue and the little highlight in the eye, it's not just white. It's kind of blends with other colors, so and it kind of softens the impact. So I'll put that there for now, and I'm gonna work on the rest of the lid of the eye using my flesh, the rest of the flesh, and I'm gonna stick with the middle tone for now. And seeing how the light is actually coming from this direction in the picture, it's coming from this direction. I have to also keep that in mind, especially when I lay down the flesh, the top lid. And these days, you know, the whole makeup thing, it's kind of difficult to make some judgments. But you know, I do the best I can. All right. I'm also going to indicate the underlid, the lid at the bottom, and this is the middle tone that I'm using. All right, to get that whole thing going. Of course, the fleshy part, the eyelid. Um, I'm putting that down as well. But I'm also going to work on. Oh, don't worry about it. It's fine. It happens all the time, especially when I'm on a rush. I'm trying to meet some deadlines, and my things fall all the way. I see a little purple in there, so and that's what I'm saying. I paint sort of kind of in a frenzy, and I don't necessarily use the um, the scale of gray, um, or at least the value that I see. As far as with the chroma, kind of expediting. I mean, um, expediting my process here. And for the sake of a demonstration, I'll make this a little to indicate that this is where the light's coming from. Also the bottom lid. All right, that's important. Um, the side of the eye, um, where the ridge of the nose is starting, I'm going to indicate that too, just to give a little presence of something happening because, you know, people want action. It take it too long to get to the serious content. So being that it's sort of reddish brown, um, I use my alizarin crimson and ultramarine with a dab of green to kill the color a little bit. All right, take down the value and also to kill the color. All right. Now this is too dark, and of course you just make your adjustments. So you dabble into the reserve number, the third, the dark, and let's bring this in. What's that? Well, what green does, green kind of takes down the chroma. Especially when we're talking about flesh tones, we're talking about orange, green. These are complementary colors, and complementary kind of takes away or lessens the chroma of the primary. So I use these understanding of color as have gone along all these years to help me understand what I'm painting. So I'm just gonna do that, kind of get on the side of the eyelids here, the bottom lid, and as I go along, I can even delve into the side. Now this is red. It's a lot of red on here, so of course red reflects from the clothing onto the flesh, and I see some purples there too. So just get into that, and man, I hate when my nerves are wrecked. Don't y'all? Yeah. Like I said, it's been a long time. So, so under pressure. Uh, and plus, I really can't see that well. So I'm just trying to cope with what I have. It's like um, I'm a football team that's playing not on my field. So it's really hard to try to work things out. All right. Um, it's starting to come together because when I really get into it, I get into the reflections, I get into the wetness. I try to create wetness to the eyes to make it jump out at you. The task of any realist in my particular genre, my main task is to kind of recreate life. You have photography. Photography is fine, but it's not done by a human mind, and that's the difference to me. So now certain areas that's probably going to be reflective is under here. And when I do all of this, I go back in the second stage and I really get into solidifying stuff as I go along. There's all kinds of in three dimensionals. You have light that's cascading on certain sides of things, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to sculpt or turn the light so that you can understand from light to dark how it revolves around an object. So that's my main purpose as I go along. I'm going to try to fill in a little bit more information so that it's easier for you all to take in, because this is only about a 30-minute paint session. And if my wife had it her way, I'd be painting the whole entire time and not talking. Here, less work, less words, more talk, less words and more work. It's all right. Now I'm making fun of her because, you know, she really keeps me in check, though. She really does, and I'm very happy that we've been together for 30 years. So over 30 years, been dating for yeah, all the red reflections as I'm trying to demonstrate all of this reflected light and color. So just working on one half. Later on, I'm going to get to the finish of this piece, but I'm just trying to make it so that you can understand where I'm coming from and see how I work at home. Now I see the whole face, and which is good. Now this side of the face is a lot lighter. So what I can do to help, one thing I hate when I'm painting, I try to, like I said, my whole stage is try to eradicate all of the white that plays with my eyes. All right, so I'm gonna get into that a little bit. I'm gonna use the middle tone here that I drew up, and kind of try to tone things down a little bit so I could see more what I'm doing. Um, Eyes and color always plays tricks. So sometimes too, I just cover the whole thing, which works as well. But just trying to give you a demonstration of color and how I go about things.
That eye is amazing. It's very piercing.
So far,
It looks like it's just coming right at you.
that's it. It's dimensional. The funny thing is, it's just not even. It's not even done yet. So thank you.
Oh, but you get yeah. It's still like.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I'll work a larger brush, more coverage on that side. All these new brushes. I use what, Hobby Lobby's brushes because it's close by. So it's an easy shop. Rather than waiting on things to come from Dick Blick or whatever, I do that every few months and get all my stuff delivered. But sometimes you're in a rush, you need to do something. And I know there are things about Hobby Lobby, but the bottom line is, my philosophy is not going to get in the way of me trying to make some cash. So, I do the Hobby Lobby, and they're synthetic brushes. They're synthetic hog hair brushes. It's good for the first few stages of painting. So I do shop there. I go to Michael's, and they're atrocious. Especially, they don't have what I need. So I'm just trying to spread a little bit more information. Still not broken in yet. Because with all this blue light and all this light coming in from the window and everything else, it's really killing my visuals. So that kind of helps with that side of the face. As a matter of fact, I'll get into what I perceive as some of the darkest darks on this side. So yeah, I'm sticking with my lines. Of course, as Doreen noticed, I lose a lot, but that's okay because I know what I see, and I judge my judgment as far as getting my information correct. So I'm going to go back um, to putting down the my middle tones to a point. Now, getting into my colors, my palette, um, I use a standard portrait palette with some exceptions. I go crazy because the zone method where you use either your primary colors, then your white and your black. I don't use that. I use there's so many colors out there. Why am I going to recreate something that's already there? So I buy tubes of paint, and I experiment, and they tend to work, especially if it's for a certain object that's a certain color. you know, because by the time you get into it, if you really got crazy about your colors, all right, you're gonna say, I don't want to contaminate uh, my color with a brush. So you'll switch a brush to use the same brush with the same color. It just gets too much. so, so that's how I operate. It's like, hey, um, why waste my time when something already exists? Now, people like Max Ginsburg, he actually, he does definitely stick to his colors. He gets off on creating his own colors from scratch, and it's all fine and good. The zone method, and all that. Um, as you keep painting, you start to get into your own um, way of doing things, and you start leaving things that you picked up along the way, and you get comfortable with what you do. All right, so it's not a bad thing at all. Now, I'm going to put in her lips because It's ruby red. It's baiting me right now. So you know, I'm gonna put that in. So I'm taking a little bit. I have a cadmium red deep here, and of course, it, the brand that I use, it's sometimes important because when you get the top brands, the pigment's nice and strong, and the tinting power, it really helps with your paints. But you know, if you can't afford, you know, cadmium red from Harding or whatever, buy the next best thing. This is a hue. This is a cadmium red hue. Um, I'm going to use it. Now I'm going to put a little, the lips, as I noticed, it has a little bluish in there. So I'm going to take some permanent magenta. I'm going to kill it a little bit, or neutralize it a little bit with some white, titanium white. Um, Now I did start talking about my palettes. My palette, it's from cool, it's from warm to cool. So I start off with my whites, Naples yellow, my reds and stuff like that, and then I get into. It's funny. I like to I change things around a little bit. I like my earth tones right in the middle of both of them. So all right, there you go. That really helps. And one other thing I'm going to do is check my timing here. uh, wow, 45 minutes almost gone like that. It's 1:44. All right, so I'm going to start putting in some dark information, and then, like I said, I jump around, so it works for me that by the time I finish the stage, which is generally about 3 hours, um, I sit back, let it dry. This brush is too large for that. Yeah. Okay, here we are. So I put in my docs so I can kind of understand more information. It's like trying to learn a different language, I suppose, right? Because as you go along, you know, you understand things better as you paint along. All right. Um, I'm gonna move on to the second eye because it's the whole Cyclops thing is not working either. So my glasses on. As we get older, we all know, man. You know, things we used to do. Um, Now, of course, the lid is just one of those things. I don't want to get too dark underneath the second lid, the second bottom lid. Uh, so I'm going to just indicate that there is a ridge here um, with a lesser value um, color, and I'm going to go a little red to try to indicate. Of course, I dabble a little bit with this to help the drying. I paint in the top of the lid with a red, and later on I'll blend it. But it's a softer, lesser value color. All right. Now, when I have my malt sticks here, I was going to demonstrate this with using this. You know, you make this yourself with dowel and whatnot and rags. So I do a lot of that. I have a huge one at home, but I'm going to just not use it because it's cumbersome. Now the challenge that I like sometimes, and it's kind of, you know, I like having those paint outs where everyone is, you know, studio space. And that's something that I'd like to do with the art league too. Just have a model and everyone have gather around and just paint. And in the way that you're given like 3 hours to create something and you come up with something. That seems like it's fun. So each session you're gonna finish one painting one way or another. You know. All right, so of course, you try to mix your colors so that they, especially with when it comes to eyes, there are some adjustments, but eyes should match, right? So you try to put that in. And the nature of the eyes, they're like they're like a baseball or a yeah. So the dimension of that, you kind of have to try to paint that in. And as far as eyes too, they're a wet object. It's moisture. It's moist. So you have to when you paint eyes, you have to keep that in mind as well. Um, so having a little color underneath, little small highlighted lines, and that comes down the road. But to show the moisture, it does become significant in creating the illusion of something wet. It's not going to dry fast enough for me in light of the amount of time we have here. Um, but keeping in mind using the Venetian red. And the reason why you have this line across here, there's always a shadow, cast shadow from the eyelids, because if the light's coming from any direction, you have that cast shadow going in. So that's part of it. All right. So there's some blending going on with that, especially that the light falling from a certain area. So you want to indicate that. I have a habit of watching television. When I watch television, I look at eyes and I look at all of the highlights in the eyes to see where the lights are coming from. Sometimes the two light source, you can see that and you picture that. And of course, all of the highlights in the face, when you look at a picture, you can see what light's stronger than the other, what's the main light, and what's the lesser light. And then also you look for areas where there's crescent light. And it's really cool. I do that a lot whenever I watch television. As a matter of fact, I love movies and things like that because you see the color schemes in the movies. And it's just that you see how colors work together. So all of that, CSI Miami, to me, that's like the best show for color. And I watch that show all of the time, and I'm just fascinated how they make all these lights, all the colors work. All right, so I'm gonna move on to another part. I think we're running out of time to go next door. Um, I'm gonna move on to one area too that's very important, like the nape of the lips on the corners. There's a little dimple that goes here, and it all depends on how the lip is shaped, but I love the transition that happens with the lips. It goes in on the corners and so forth. And trying to create that when I paint, that's one of the fun things in life for me, really. So I'm just going to paint a little bit of this in there. Of course, the three-dimensional areas of that. There's certain areas that actually goes a little deeper than other areas. And generally it's where you have more space in between the lip ridges. Mm. Yeah, I go through these decision makings all the time. What brush should I use? All right, so it's very red. So I'm gonna to create the illusion. Um, Sometimes too, you can just dabble with the red and go in there and blend it. And right away, you start to see things happen with that. If I was to go even whiter, you'll see, and these aren't highlights, I'm probably going to blend this later. So I'm just going to put where I see a transition in the lip between the top and the bottom. And of course, generally, there's a different chromatic change that happens at the bottom lip than the top lip, the top of the bottom lip. So it all depends on how light fall on it. And usually there's a reflection at the bottom, the top ridge of the bottom lip. That's generally here. Um, that also helps. But as you blend, things come together. Now, of course, the corners are also going to have some sort of a transitional situation going on there that kind of dictates the panting of the lips. All right, I'll work on the bottom. Just trying to work quickly to actually give you an idea of how I work. So that's really in a nutshell. The what do they call it? It's a fun name. They like to call it the Crimson Line or so, the Vermilion Line, and I get into all of these names that they call these parts of the lip and the facial anatomy. I'll go lighter. I'll make this blue because the transition of blue, adding a cool to a warm kind of creates a lot of interesting things happening. So the vermilion border, I'm just going to kind of indicate some stuff with that. And usually the corners of the lips here, like I said, it curves in. So it's usually a little lighter with less chroma, less information. This particular one, the ridge is right there. So, and her pouting, if you look at the picture, this area here, anatomically, these are a group of muscles that's here, and you can basically see them. So that you can see them with they're kind of with the highlights that's surrounding it. It kind of shows you how it's laid out, and not to mention too. And the other thing I should have pointed out was also she's kind of has her face down a little bit like this, and so the light is actually a little different, and the anatomical features of her face is different too. She's got lesser of a chin and more of a nose, a longer nose. So seeing that in the process kind of gives you an idea of what's what. Now these are areas that I love to work. All right, the flesh tones and everything else, trying to create the depth of the face and the fleshiness of fleshiness of the face. It's all a lot of fun for me. But generally, I like working to create um, the illusion of depth in these areas. Lately, I've been fascinated with the ridges of the lips, the way that all of these things here happen, and people stylize this a lot. Um, and I generally stay away from stylizing because I try to be as close to the pictures I possibly can. Um, but I do also understand, and I say this all the time, cameras lie, pictures lie, so you have to figure out where the lie is, and you have to make those corrections. I told that to a photographer once, and he pulled me in a room and said, "No, you're wrong." So he starts showing me pictures that he's taken where the camera, the information in the camera is exactly perfect. And I'm like, well, it's a machine, and what you're doing is you're manipulating that. And so, in essence, you figured out how to tell a better lie. you know. So we go through that a lot. Now, wow, I'm looking at this, and she's tilted. The funny story is, and I didn't know this about myself for a long time. What I used to do is, like, when I painted, I worked with inferior lights, and it made all my work dark. And I had to figure out what's causing this, and making an analysis of your work. You have to say, there's something wrong. So I take it to the mirror. Well, I realize it's the light. But then the other thing I realized is that I took it to the mirror to see exactly what's going on, and I saw all of my imagery going slanted down. So I favored this side of my work. And so I had to make those corrections. So I keep that in mind whenever I paint, to try to understand my defaults and how to correct it. So I guess you can call that, I used to coach football, and all the self-corrected methods that we do, especially throwing the football or whatever, that's part of it. So it's like, as artists, we do have to do some self-corrective methods to make sure that our work is on point.